So you're in for a real treat. Get ready to listen carefully to this testimony. It's, I think, one of the most powerful testimonies I've heard, and I've heard a lot of testimonies. And I'm going to introduce Patricia Sandoval. She's an international pro-life speaker, author, and co-host on EWTN's Informe Pro Vida. She has appeared on many television radio shows, sharing the story of her life's transformation and work in the pro-life community. She is regarded as a primary voice for the unborn, chastity, and post-abortion healing, especially in the Spanish-speaking world. She tells of years living on the streets, drug abuse, the devastation of multiple abortions. She is the co-author of the book, Transfigured: Her Escape from Drugs, Homelessness, and the Back Doors of Planned Parenthood. It is a riveting story of her life and her incredible rescue into the arms of our merciful and healing God. So we welcome Patricia Sandoval.
Good morning, everybody. I am truly blessed to be here in this beautiful basilica. I want to dedicate this talk as an act of reparation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary for the sin of abortion in our country. The Lord has been very, very merciful in my life, and because of his great divine mercy, I've given my life to tell this story around the world, to repair all the damage that I've done in the past and all the people that I deceived. And I also offer this for all the unborn children that I saw behind the doors of Planned Parenthood. My story begins in California. I was born in California, and my parents are from Mexico. My parents came to the United States very young, and they were looking for the American dream. When I was born in California, my parents baptized me into the Catholic faith. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and we were all baptized into the faith, but we never really practiced our faith at home. Jesus was never the center of our hearts, our family, and our lives. So we kind of did everything out of tradition. I don't remember praying as a family. We didn't have a Bible. We didn't know how to pray the rosary. We never went to Mass when I was a child, but I had beautiful childhood memories. My father, very hard worker, my mother, housewife, and I have the most beautiful memories of my mother just caring for us, cooking and cleaning and feeling safe in my household. But since we didn't have God in our family and in our hearts, we didn't know what virtue was. I didn't know that I was created to be a saint. I didn't know what the virtue of chastity and purity was. So the values that my parents showed us as children were success, and there's nothing wrong with that. My father would always say, "Mija, we came to the United States for a better future, and it's very important that you get good grades, you have a good, successful job, travel the world, and be somebody." So I thought that just being known and being successful in the United States made you worthy and made you somebody. And my mother, like I said, she is, but she, to me, in my childhood, was the best mother that a child could have. And one day, my mother said, "Patricia, you're at that age where you need to receive your first Holy Communion." But I really didn't know what that was. So she registered me into CCD. We did it out of, like I said, tradition. It was just a thing that we did in our Hispanic culture. We just kind of did things because we did them. And that's where I learned about the love of God. So it was in CCD that I learned who Jesus was. He died on the cross for my sins, and who Mama Mary was. She's my mama. And I grew to love God the Father with all my heart. I would start having conversations with him in my backyard and look up into the sky. And one day after CCD, I told my mom, "Mom, I really would like to send a love note to God, to heaven, but how do I do this?" So my mother bought me a balloon, and I wrote a love note to God, and I remember letting it go and looking into the clouds and believing, and he did, with all my heart, that God received my love note. But after I received Holy Communion, my first communion, I forgot about God. I didn't hear about him anymore. And like I said, in my house, we never prayed. And in the 90s, my mother started getting really involved with the New Age era. It started to hit really big in the 90s. And so my mom started to believe in reincarnation. My mom started having friends over at our house that would do tarot card readings, palm readings. And basically what we were practicing in our household was witchcraft. And we let the doors of the enemy, of Satan, come into our house, into our family. Jesus Christ was never the king of our home, of our hearts. Satan was in our household. What I did notice when my mom got very, very deep into the New Age is that she started to change a lot. My mom didn't like to be at home anymore. She'd go out with friends. Sometimes she wouldn't come home. And I know that her friends were influencing her a lot. You know, they would say things like, you're just a maid, you're just a servant, you're just a domestic slave at home. You're not doing anything with your life. And my mom believed this. And this is what the enemy puts in the hearts of mothers and wives. And, you know, after my talks, conferences, I've had women tell me, you know, I'm not doing anything with my life. I want to know God's will. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And they think they're not doing anything. But it's truly in our vocation as wives and as mothers that God can make us a saint. It's the most important thing in the eyes of God. But like I said, we were influenced by the world. And during the same year, my mom got very heavily involved in the New Age era. They announced at my school in the 6th grade, I was 12 years old, that Planned Parenthood was going to come and give us a course on sexuality. And remember back in the early 90s, there was no internet, there's no YouTube, there's no way of kind of investigating what truth was. So as a child, what I learned at school and what I learned at home, that's what truth was to me. So I remember I had my mom sign the permission slip, and she said, this is amazing, this is great, you're gonna learn how to be responsible the day you have sex. I didn't even know what sex was. You know, I didn't have my parents' example. My parents never married through the Catholic Church. So as a child, I didn't dream of, you know, having a husband and walking down the aisle in a white, beautiful bride dress. I didn't have that example, and I didn't know what the sacredness and beauty of sexuality was, or the sacrament of matrimony was. So my mother said, this is great, you're gonna learn how to practice safe sex, and she gave me permission. You know, back then you had to have permission. Now, you know that the abortion industry goes into the schools, and it's a child's right and privacy, and the parents don't have to know anything. Even if a child wants to have an abortion, a 13-year-old child wants to have an abortion in our country, it's the child's right. And I remember getting to school the day the abortion industry came. I remember it was a counselor that came, and I believe she was like a physician. And anyhow, so she came to my school, and I get to my desk, and on my desk there was a banana and a ton of condoms. And I remember looking over at my classmates, and everybody had the same thing on their desk, and we all started laughing. And it felt kind of weird and uncomfortable a little bit. And we were kind of curious about what sex was. And what I remember at this class was that abortion was a woman's right. If you find yourself, girls, in the future in an unwanted pregnancy, in a crisis, you can come to our center. We will help you. Abortion is the way out. Abortion is the solution. And we'll never tell your parents. This is your privacy. This is your right. You know, if you have an appointment with us, we'll call and say we're a friend of yours, or we'll send you stuff in the mail, and we'll just say it's a letter from your friend. But abortion is a woman's right. I remember this woman spoke about masturbation, and she encouraged us to start experimenting with our own bodies sexually. And what does this do? When somebody's addicted to masturbation, then they become addicted to pornography. And then they become addicted to sex. And what happens when you start having sex before marriage? Well, there's unwanted pregnancies, and then from there, abortions. And this is a tactic of the abortion industry. The abortion industry, we know it's a blood money market. They need to meet a certain amount of abortions monthly, a quota. So what do? Since parents aren't educating their children at home about sexuality, we will become their sexual educators. We'll go into the schools and we'll indoctrinate, basically, with this false teaching of safe sex that doesn't exist. And safe sex was actually created to fail. There's statistics when condoms and birth control pills were passed around high schools and universities to prevent pregnancy, it was on the contrary. There was more STDs, and there was more unwanted pregnancies on the rise. It spiked up because this is a tactic. It was created to fail, safe sex, because the abortion industry needs abortions. And they know that if they go into the schools and they promote this false education, they will have future abortion patients. I remember her saying to the young men in the class, if your partner is ever pregnant and she wants to have an abortion, it's not your choice. It's not your body, it's not your right. This is the message that she was giving to all the boys in the class, basically. And I feel like the abortion industry set up a trap for me when I was 12 years old. I was a victim of abortion for the first time with their lies and deception when I was 12 years old, and they came to me, they came to my school. They never spoke about the beauty of being a mother, motherhood, or a father. They never spoke the beauty of human life and dignity. And I remember her saying that it wasn't truly a baby until a woman's 5 months pregnant because it's not completely formed. So before 5 months, gestation, it's just a sack of tissue, the clump of cells. And I remind you, we didn't have the ultrasound machines we had today. We didn't have internet. We didn't have anything to really research after this information. So pretty much, I thought that sex was love. I thought that when I fell in love, you give your heart and you give your body. Sex was the way you showed somebody you love them. They never told us the consequences about having sex before marriage. And at the age of 12, I was pretty much pro-abortion when I left class that day. And that was 1992. And things were really, that was probably the worst year of my whole life. That's probably the year I've suffered the most in my life, when I was 12. The enemy is always and constantly trying to rob us of our purity. We're in a battlefield 24/7 for our souls, especially for our purity. Our Lady told St. Faustina that more people go to hell because of sins of the flesh. And St. Jacinta had a vision of hell also. And Our Lady as well told her that because of the sins of the flesh and immodesty, many women and many people go to hell. And that's where the enemy attacks us. And now it's even worse. And it's even worse for the youth because we have screens, we have movies, we have music, we have everything that's infiltrated with filth these days, with impurity. And the battle is even harder for our souls in these times for purity. My mother, that same year, packed her bags, and she went into the living room and told my father, my brother and sister and I that she was just ruining her life, that she wasn't doing anything, that she was leaving. She felt like she was like this little bird in a gold cage, kind of trapped. She was just everybody's domestic slave, and she wanted to be somebody and wanted to live life. So my mother left. And when I felt abandoned for my mother, because my mother was my world when I was little, I hated my mother for many years. I was very, very angry. And so I grew up very rebellious. I've worked with teens around the world. I've gone into many schools around the world, hundreds of thousands of teens I've worked with. Over 20 years I've done this. And when I speak to them and their wounds, it's always mother-father wound. And that's why they're angry, that's why they're rebellious, that's why they're suicidal, that's why they're doing drugs, that's why they're in pornography. And that's why I was angry. It's because I had that mother wound. And I grew up very vain. I was a very prideful young girl. Everything was about me. It was about being beautiful and looking good and what am I driving. I had straight A's in school because my goal in life was to be rich. was to be known, was to be famous, and to travel the world and to be successful. That was my goal. That was all I had in my heart. When I was 19 years old, I met my first true boyfriend, like my first love. Unfortunately, I was not pure anymore. I had given somebody my virginity, and but this boyfriend was very special to me. And so I thought sex was love. And we started having safe sex, and it failed. And 6 months into our relationship, I was pregnant. I took a pregnancy test in my bedroom because I was very sick and feeling nauseous. And when it came out positive, I was pregnant. It wasn't fear. I was panicking. And the first thing I thought was, my life is over. My mom, left because she didn't want to be a domestic slave. Now I'm going to be that domestic slave. All the goals and plans I had for my life, it's destroyed. It's done with. The second thing I thought of was my father. I'm going to disgrace my father, and he's going to kick me out of the house, and he'll be very, very upset with me. And I just was panicking. But when I told the news to my boyfriend, to my surprise, he said, "No, Patricia, I'm with you. You're not alone. I'm very, very happy. I will support you, and we can do this. You can go to school. I'm going to help you." The words of a man who takes responsibility for his actions, doesn't abandon the woman, gives her security, gives her hope, has such great power to save an unborn child. I believe with my whole heart, if every man on this planet was created to be the Saint Joseph he was created to be, every man on this planet, every father were to defend the family and life, I truly believe with my heart that abortion would hardly exist. We need men, true men, to take responsibility, fathers, for their actions. And he did. And I felt immediately safe and comforted and hopeful. And so I continued on with my pregnancy, being hopeful. When I was 4 months pregnant, one day my best friends came over, and they were crying, and they begged me to have an abortion. They said, "You're making the worst mistake of your life. You're not ready to be a mother," even though I was already a mother, but I didn't know this. "Remember what we learned at school. It's not a baby until you're 5 months pregnant. Therefore, you have time to have an abortion." Again, panic and fear entered my heart. They're right. What am I doing? I'm not even married yet. This isn't the time. That's what Satan does to a woman in crisis. It's fear. The root of abortion is fear. What am I going to do? I'm alone. I have no job. My parents. It's fear. He instills fear into the woman. That's what it is. And I'm not saying my friends were bad friends. They weren't. They thought they were giving me the best advice. They were terrified for my life. But we received false information. Hosea says, the word of God says, "My people perished for lack of knowledge." We didn't know what truth was. We didn't learn it at home. So I decided to have an abortion. I decided not to tell the truth to my partner. He's also Mexican. And I truly believed that Hispanic people didn't have an abortion. They didn't have abortions, that it didn't exist in Latin America. My father has 14 brothers and sisters. My mother has 12. So I just thought, this was something here in our country. He'll never accept an abortion. So I decided to lie to him and tell him I had a miscarriage. I made an appointment in the morning early. I wanted to be the first person in and out in Santa Rosa, California. I got out of my vehicle. The amount of shame I felt was overwhelming. This is what women feel when they're about to have an abortion. They're not excited. They're scared. And there's so much shame, even though it's legal in our country. And, politicians and our laws say it's the best solution for a woman. It's her right. There's shame and there's fear. I walked into the waiting room, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The waiting room was filled with young girls, 13, 14, 15 years of age, on a Tuesday morning. I asked the receptionist, What are these little girls doing here? I'm 19 years old, but they should be in school. Oh, here in California, they have the right to be here. They can cut school, have an abortion at the age of 13, and their parents don't have to know about it. This is their right. But if you go to California today and you try to buy NyQuil and you're 20 years of age, it's illegal. You have to be 21 years of age to buy medicine. And that's the twisted laws we have in our country. And so I was the first person in. I was so scared because they don't tell you what an abortion is. I sat in the operation room, and the abortionist walks in, a woman. She looked very well put together, and at this time I was working in the medical field as a secretary, so I respected physicians, doctors, and she looked very well put together, and she said, are you nervous? I said, very nervous. She said, look, don't be nervous. If this makes you feel better, I've had an abortion in the past. I performed 2 abortions on my daughters last year. My daughter's okay, I'm okay, and you're gonna be okay. I would never do something to hurt you. So the fact that she told me that she had performed 2 abortions on her daughter, and she wouldn't do anything to her daughter, well, she's not gonna hurt me either. I trusted her. And she said, it's only gonna be 5 minutes. They brought in the ultrasound machine to see exactly how far along I was. And I remember that the screen was facing the abortionist. I wanted to see the screen, and she said, why? I said, I just want to see what's behind the screen. Honey, I'm looking at a clump of cells. Don't worry. You're going to be fine. So I had the abortion. I heard the vacuum machine. After the abortion, I had kind of mixed feelings. I felt relieved that my problem was over because I thought abortion liberated you. I thought abortion set you free. That's what they tell society and tell women. I never was told about post-abortion syndrome. She told me that I'd have some cramping and bleeding, and she said, look, you're good to go. You can go to work tomorrow, you're good, and you don't have to come back. And I walked out of that center thinking I was free, but I walked out in bondage. I lied to my boyfriend. I told him I had a miscarriage, and he was devastated by the lie. And I started to feel very guilty. And I said, look, it was a miscarriage. It wasn't anything. And don't worry, it wasn't the right time anyways. But what started to occur was that we both started to suffer post-abortion syndrome. Remember, it takes 2 to tango. It takes 2 for conception, man and woman. So when a woman suffers post-abortion syndrome, so does the partner, so does the male. He suffers it too. So the symptoms I started to get was depression, anxiety, severe sadness. I would see children in public and it would traumatize me. I started pulling my hair out. It's a condition called trichotillomania. And what started to happen to my boyfriend was he was telling me, I feel like there's something missing. I feel depressed. I don't know what's wrong with me. He started having nightmares, reoccurring nightmares. And I said, well, what nightmare are you having? He's like, it's the same one over and over. I see a little girl run up to me and she calls me father. And it would make me angry and feel guilty. And I would say, our miscarriage was nothing. But again, we started to practice safe sex with birth control pills. And again, I was pregnant. Multiple abortions is very, very common. It's not common to hear a testimony on it, but it's very common. 65% of women that have 1 abortion will most likely have a 2nd or a 3rd. And this is what the abortion industry knows. They know that when a woman has 1 abortion and she walks out of that center, she'll be back again. Why? Because she's not going to live a life of chastity after the first abortion. Because she's going to go back into that spider web and tangle herself up, and she'll be back again. Multiple abortions are common for men. A man that's not living a chaste life, a life of promiscuity, will most likely have unwanted pregnancies. And I've met men after my talks admit to me, I've had several girlfriends and I've took them to have abortions. So it's common in men and women. And I was back for a 2nd abortion. I couldn't believe it. I went to Planned Parenthood the 2nd time, but I didn't tell my boyfriend and I didn't tell anybody about the 2nd abortion because the shame was overwhelming. And I thought to myself, I learned about sexual education. I'm not stupid. What's going on? They're going to think I'm irresponsible. So I went to a different center because Planned Parenthood, because I was embarrassed. Same thing. An abortionist comes in, a woman, and tells me it'll be over in 5 minutes. Never told me about post-abortion syndrome. When I laid there on the table, I laid stiff. I didn't cry. I was numb. I was like a rock. And she congratulated me after that abortion, saying that I'm the best patient she's ever had because most women cry and scream during an abortion, and I made her job so easy. And she gave me a bag of condoms and a bag of birth control pills to continue practicing safe sex. And when I left Planned Parenthood, the symptoms the next day were so bad. It was to the point where I had eating disorders, I had anorexia, nightmares. My emotions were like a roller coaster. I'd cry and scream all the time. But the worst of it all was I was suicidal. I wanted to take my life. I would contemplate how I would kill myself every day. My boyfriend didn't know he had a second abortion, and his symptoms were worse. He started using cocaine and alcohol, and he started gambling. So men process post-abortion syndrome different than women. They start getting into addiction. And he was suffering post-abortion syndrome. And I got pregnant for a third time. When the test came out positive for the third pregnancy, I was so angry. I thought to myself, what is going on? I'm practicing safe sex. I'm doing everything they showed me at school. But you see, the trap that they set up for me when I was 12 years old in the 6th grade was already being fulfilled. I told my boyfriend about the third pregnancy. He was so excited. And I said, don't even get excited. I already have an appointment to have an abortion. My heart didn't care anymore. My heart after the first abortion was like a stone. And then he responds, hey, but what about me? I don't want to have an abortion. I want to be a father. What about me? And when he said those words to me, I felt as if he was trying to take my right away from me. And I lashed out at him and said, who are you to take my right away from me? You have no authority over my body. It is my body and it is my choice. I don't care what you think. You have no say. If you'd like to come tomorrow, great. If you don't, I don't care what you think. But the reality of it all is that I did take his right away from him. I killed his paternity. And this is the sad thing about abortion. If a father wants his child and he tries to save the life of his baby, I've seen men do this outside of centers, abortion centers, he has no right, no power, no right to save the life of his child. It's very sad. So abortion not only takes the life of the unborn, but it takes the real rights of women and the mother, and it takes the right of the father as well. And so I went to the abortion center, and he went. He didn't want to be there, but he went. The vacuum machine went on, and the whole time he was crying. And I can feel his tears just fall on my face, and I felt so guilty, and I thought to myself, how did I come to have 3 abortions in 1.5 years? Because a lot of young kids, a lot of women my age, a lot of men my age, think that they won't get pregnant when they're having sex out of marriage and think it will never happen to them. And I had 3 abortions at this point. I left him. I was so miserable in my relationship. It was falling apart. I was suicidal. And I felt like I needed a different life, like to start all over, somewhere where nobody knew me. So I went and I moved away from my father's house. I moved to Sacramento, California. And I applied to work at Planned Parenthood. I was so thankful for their services and for the abortion that they helped me with, that I wanted to do something for the community and for women, I thought. I applied for a job there, and when they found out that I was bilingual in Spanish and that I was post-abortive, they said, we really need a back office nurse that speaks Spanish here. 95% of our abortions are Hispanics that don't speak English, which was shocking to me. But now we know this, that abortion targets minorities like myself. Abortion centers are located in neighborhoods where there are minorities because it's rooted in genocide. from Margaret Sanger. That's what it's rooted in. And they said to me, look, you don't have nursing credentials. You never went to nursing school. We're going to hire you as a nurse here. We need your Spanish. So we'll just train you on the spot. I was illegally hired as a nurse at Planned Parenthood. This is very dangerous. None of their paperwork was translated in Spanish. Before you have an abortion, you have to sign a consent form that says, you can die during this procedure, and if you die, your parents cannot sue us, your family members can't sue us. And then you see the list of complications, of perforation, infertility, of terrible complications, never translated into the Spanish language, okay? And 95% of the abortion patients were Spanish. This is not medical care. This is not. I started Planned Parenthood on a Monday. I was taken into the office, and the manager said, all right, today you will prepare 50 young girls for their abortions. We do 50 abortions a week. You will never use the word baby in the center. Mother, father, he, she, even the word fetus, because that even gives human dignity. You will never let them see the ultrasound machine during their last ultrasound take, that we do to determine how far along they are. You will never help a woman that is crying, because if she's crying, she wants another option. She wants someone to help her. There's no help but abortion here. You ignore those tears, so you can't be friendly. And if you see that she's scared to have an abortion, you do everything in your will that she makes it to her appointment. You will never bring a picture of a family member here, like your cousins or, because if a woman comes in and sees pictures of children and family, she can get traumatized and will lose that abortion. Do you understand? And I didn't understand. I counseled 50 young girls, thinking I was helping them. Girls that were 13 years old, crying. And I would say, look, you're going to ruin your life. This is the best solution for you. And I thought I was helping them. But then Wednesday came, and it was a day we had to do the procedures. And I wasn't trained, okay, to assist the abortionist. I was thrown in. And this is considered a surgical procedure. I go into the office, and the manager says, today you will be on your feet. We got to get these girls in and out. We got to get them in and out because time is money. So she said, you will never tell a soul what goes on behind these doors, ever. You will never tell the mothers, she used the word mothers, that after each abortion we throw their babies away in the garbage. And you will never tell the fathers in the lobby, in the waiting room, that after each abortion we throw their babies away in the garbage. Do you understand? And I truly did not understand. And I took the first patient in. She was 15 years old, 3 months pregnant, and she was crying. The abortionist comes in and says, Patricia, stand behind my shoulder. We're going to start the procedure. So he set up his tools, surgical tools, sharp tools, dangerous tools. And this is the first time I see an abortion. It's like the scales were fallen from my eyes, and I was witnessing an abortion because I didn't want to see anything during mine. I closed my eyes, and I stood behind his shoulder. And he took out the instrument that is basically the tip of the vacuum machine called the cannula. It's a thin bar. He turns on this powerful vacuum, and he starts the abortion. I'm witnessing this girl kicking and screaming, and this abortion is dodging her legs. And I'm thinking, wait, he needs to retrieve because this doesn't look safe. He's got this sharp instrument in her womb, but he can't retrieve. Because if he leaves any little tissue behind, what happens is it could cause an infection and she can actually die. He has to make sure everything is out. And then it dawns on me, wait a minute, but he can't even see what he's doing. How does he know he has the sack of tissue that everything's out? Well, he can't. Abortion procedure is completely done blindly. It's a blind man's surgery. Can you imagine a heart surgeon doing a heart surgery, telling his staff, hey, I'm doing this surgery, but I can't see anything, and I don't know if I'm done. I think I'm done, but I'm going to guess. So let me just start putting the sutures in. Well, this abortionist said, Patricia, it's been 5 minutes. I think I'm done. I'm not sure, but I think we got it. I think. Is this truly medical care? So when you hear, pro-abortion people saying, legalize abortion to make it safe, that's a lie. Doesn't make sense. Same procedure, if it's legal or illegal. So I had to be the abortionist's eyes. I grabbed the bag that was attached to the vacuum machine. And I was led by another fake nurse my age that was hired with no credentials into a hidden room behind the doors of Planned Parenthood. In front of me was like a glass dish. And she said, shut the door after each abortion, because if that girl goes to the bathroom and sees what we're about to see, then we're in big trouble. Nobody can see what we're about to see. So she told me to dump the contents into the dish. And I did. And I will never forget the smell of death. Abortion has a smell. It has a sound, the vacuum. It has a smell. It's death. She took out a pair of forceps that are like tweezer-looking instruments, and she starts to look. And to my shock and my surprise, she holds up to the light an arm with a little hand. This is part number 1. We need 5 parts of the baby to let the abortionist know that the abortion was successful. The first thing I saw on the fingertips were the fingerprints. And inside of myself, I started to scream, fingerprints identify us as irrepeatable, authentic human beings. We found the 5 parts. The last part was the head, and it was heartbreaking. I saw the baby's eyes, nose, but what broke my heart was the baby's mouth was open wide, as if this baby was screaming and crying, but this baby had no voice, and there was nobody there to hear him cry. And she puzzled back a body together. And inside of myself, I said, they lied to me. They deceived me. I aborted 3 children. And working behind the doors of Planned Parenthood was a nightmare. It is one step before going to hell. They don't care about women. They don't care about men. They don't care about the family. It was so devastating to be there. I left 3 weeks later. I didn't know the love of God. I didn't know God. So I started to do drugs, cocaine, to numb my pain. I became so addicted to methamphetamine. I lost everything. I lost my house, my cars, my education, everything, but I lost my soul. And I ended up in the streets of California as a methamphetamine addict for 3 years. Just broken inside, dead woman. I had ripped all my hair out, and I was so thin and frail from all the drugs that I've done. I was literally walking like a dead person with no hope and no hope for my life. And one day I was literally dying on the sidewalk from malnutrition and not eating anything. And I started to cry like a child. And I started to question my life. What's going to happen to me? What happened to that young girl that had dreams, that was a straight-A student, that was popular, that wanted to be somebody? You're going to die on the street. You're just garbage. You're just an assassin, and you're trash. And there's no hope for your life. And as I was crying, a thought came into my heart. And I remembered that when I was a little girl after CCD, I would run to my backyard and I would write love notes to God. And I would send them up to heaven. And I forgot about him. And I felt his presence for the first time in my life. I felt the presence of God the Father look down on me with pity. And I looked up into the sky and I yelled at him, I'm so sorry for everything I've done. You're the only thing I have at this very moment. And I repent from everything that I've done and I've destroyed my life. Please forgive me. And at that very second, a beautiful young girl my age, a waitress, ran out of a restaurant. And she looked into my eyes with mercy. Her name is Bonnie. And she said, Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. I'm a waitress at that restaurant, and I saw you crying through the window. And God gave me a word for you. He said, even if your father or mother shall abandon you, he will never abandon nor forsake you. He will be with you until the end of time. And everything you've done in your life, he forgives you. And when she held me in her arms and lifted me off my misery, I knew right then it was the arms of Jesus Christ, the King of divine mercy, that was holding me in his arms. Because when we truly repent with our whole heart, he comes into our life over and over and over, because we constantly offend him, into our lives as our King with unmeasurable mercy. He is a King of divine mercy. And she took me home. And my mother she took me home, and my mother cared for me, and we reconciled. And my mother said, Mija, I came back home to the faith. I came back to the Catholic Church, and I've been praying on my knees before the Blessed Sacrament for 3 years for God to give me this miracle. And it was truly the prayers of my mother and God's divine mercy that saved my life. And my mother took me to confession, and I went to daily mass, and she showed me the way of the Lord. And because of my mother, I healed my abortions at Rachel's Vineyard. And at that retreat, I was praying on a Saturday night, and I closed my eyes. And in a vision, I saw my 3 aborted children in front of me. And they smiled, my daughter Mariana, my son Emmanuel, and my little girl Rosario. And they said, we love you, Mother. We're in God's glory, and we're praying for you. We love you. And when I saw their dresses and how my son was dressed to my liking, and I saw the bows in my daughter's hairs, our Lord told me, do you see how your kids are dressed? Your mother, the Blessed Mother, put those little dresses on your daughters, put that beautiful clothes on your son, and comb your daughter's hairs and put those bows on their head, because she cares for the unborn. Your children are under her care. And one day when you get to heaven, you will see your children for all eternity. All the unborn children are under her care. And the greatest pain in the Blessed Virgin Mary's heart for these times is abortion. And I know my time is up, but God has been so faithful to me that he gave me an amazing husband, and I had the opportunity to become a mom again here on earth. I have 2 beautiful daughters. Maria Victoria, named after Our Lady of Victories, because she is the first victory after 3 abortions. And my second daughter is Chiara Lumina, named after servant of God, Chiara Corbella Petrillo and Saint Philomena. And God is so faithful that he's given me a family. And not only that, but he's given me purpose in my life, and he's given me a mission. And now everything I do is not to be known, because I've died to myself. But everything that I do is for God's glory. And God's given me he says he gives you the desires of your heart. I do travel the world, but the success now is not mine, it's his. And God has been faithful, and he's done beautiful things in my life that I have never, ever would have dreamed of. So I just want to ask everybody here to please do acts of reparation for abortion in our country. And especially here, we're near the Capitol. We must pray for the Supreme Court. We must pray for our president. But also what it has power is fasting and praying and doing acts of reparation and asking God to please forgive us for the sin of abortion in our country. May God bless you. And I just want to say that I will pray for you for the rest of my life. I will pray for your intentions. I will pray for God to make you saints. I will pray for your family to become saints. And I ask the same of you, if you can please pray that I have perseverance in this mission for life. May the glory always be for Almighty God. Thank you so much.